Hello everyone, Theophilus here. And quick note, let me know how you feel about the hair. I think I kind of like it. Just a little random kind of side note. So today's video is about true versus performative masculinity. Masculinity is often so very misunderstood. But I'll ask a question to get you to have a little bit of insight. When you think masculinity, do you think building strength, or do you think performing or pretending to be strong? This is the difference, right? There's so much talk about what people think masculinity is, why it's important, why it can be toxic, whatever, right? There's all these different thoughts, all these different opinions. But there's a clear difference between true and the false performative masculinity. Today we're just going to be breaking down that difference and how your own emotions can become very valuable, even your greatest asset. So we're going to differentiate first and foremost that true masculinity is what can be described as the inner strength, the emotional awareness, the discipline, the control, and the intentional action. The performative masculinity can be described as the ego-driven projection, pretending to be strong while lacking that internal structure, right? Imagine your emotions are like a river, like a tide river of emotion. That river is simply emotional energy, right? Now imagine a hydroelectric system controlling the flow of that energy. Performative masculinity is like standing in the river while you're about to be knocked down and trying to stop it with your hands. And pretending and believing that you're strong enough to stop all these emotions with just your hands. Now, when I was maybe 17, 18, a little bit of backstory on me. I was really interested in different religions, different belief systems. I really was drawn towards Christianity, but I also was a little intrigued by like the Roman beliefs, like say Stoicism, right? I think when I was 15, 16, I started trying to understand what it was, and it sounded cool to me. Now, I was a kid that grew up practicing escapism, just not being very mentally present, not really learning cognitive skills or deep problem solving skills. I was one of the kids that had potential but was very lazy mentally. And Stoicism sounded cool to me, but I mistakenly misunderstood what that Stoicism and that masculinity actually is. What I was doing was pretending to be strong by being numb, by being dull, by being emotionally non-reactive. And a lot of people would praise me for it. That this is where it can get confusing, right? Because I thought, that this is stoicism. This is stoicism, just kind of pretending to not have emotions while inside you're just slowly being broken down. You're just slowly deteriorating, slowly declining. Those are two phrases I used to use in like a joking way, but it's actually very serious. This is what happens when people are giving in consciously to depression. They're like slowly being broken down. Now, let's use some examples, right? Some real examples of what that true masculinity is. But quickly, I want to make the distinction. I thought that masculinity or stoicism was the performative, pretentious show of, say, emotional control, when it was really just emotional dullness. That's a form of performative masculinity. Now I'm going to give you some examples. One, Muhammad Ali. I see him as a prime example. All right, the man was very theatrical. He was very charismatic. He 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 got the attention. He performed on the stage. He grabbed the attention. He pleased the crowd well. He won the hearts of the people who watched him, and they became big fans of him. Right. We know float like a float like a butterfly, sting like a bee, the leg shuffle. We know, many of us, we've seen the highlights. We've seen him when he called Sonny Liston a bear and said that he's going to be world champion because he's pretty and all this stuff, right? It's funny, it's charismatic, but it wasn't just talk. You see, it wasn't just like an insincere jesting, an insincere pretending, like a bravado of puffing himself up. He was expressing real confidence that he had. And it showed whenever he fought in his highlights, in his prime, right? Boxing is something that's very, I'm not a boxer nor am I a fighter, but just in what I see, it's something that's very, very taxing on the body, something that can't really be done for very, very long periods of time. They usually just do it in their peak and their strength, and then kind of slow down. But look at his peak. Look at when he was at his best. He was disciplined, but he also had performance that was built on real skill. So under the show and the theatrics, there was deep layers of that masculinity, that discipline, that emotional control that showed in the ring, because he's already spent years developing and building himself from the ground up and becoming the fighter that mastered the art of boxing. He wasn't just showing off and making fun of people when he was fighting and in the ring and doing all of this. He was psychologically, you could say, manipulating his opponent. He was maybe subtly intimidating them and all that. But the man knew how to predict punches. He knew how to predict where punches were and move out of the way and hit people in these very, I don't know if the word orthodox is a good word, but these very, like, I would look at his highlights. He would hit people in these very, like, unpredictable positions. Like, he'd be leaning back and then just get you right there in your face. He just lean back and just get you when you don't expect it. He mastered the sport, and that's why it worked. The confidence, it made sense. It was an unfounded confidence. Another example is Rome, right? Ancient Rome, they were around anywhere from 1400 to 2000 years. Gladiatorial speeches, a lot of artistic expression, very, very sensual, even can be seen as hedonistic pagan beliefs. Yet, it was supported through structure, a foundation of discipline and structure that built the Roman society, right? All the things that Rome is known for, that's just like the icing, like the cherry on top. They were built through soldiers and hard work and discipline, structured discipline. Though it wasn't perfect, it worked. And we see, like, they conquered most of the known world and they were on top for hundreds of years. So, like, the key takeaway is, well, Rome collapsed when they stopped having that same structure. When hedonistic and pleasure-seeking way of life took over, namely the leaders, and also, different people in the hierarchy. There was infighting, kind of similar today. Like, I don't want to get into it, but like gender wars and stuff like that. other things that were going on in their society that we're seeing in American society, but I digress from that. The leaders were overtaken in these hedonistic, greedy ways, and they basically like I don't know if they taxed, but I know they worked their people literally to death. You know, they were greedy and they were very domineering, and they ended up just, like hedonism from a leader. When the leader of a country is given over to these kinds of hedonistic pleasures, that's what you get. That's what this unchecked power does. But I'm gonna digress from that point. The structure is what makes masculinity real. Now, some think that emotions are not useful, that you need to be emotionless, that you need to pretend to not have emotion, that you need to just shut down and quiet all your emotions. Now, maybe there are some outliers, people with kind of like maybe antisocial, maybe borderline psychopathic kind of tendencies that can be that, logical with and just like, just kind of actually not having emotion. That's not most people. We need to see our emotions as data and energy, right? Fear is a message. Something's not right here. We need to pay attention. We need to solve this problem. We need to watch out for this. You shouldn't just pretend that it's not there and just like shut off that signaling between your brain and your body, right? Because your body's sending you a signal, it's sending you a message that something's wrong. So that fear can be translated into preparation. You see where I'm going? Desire for something, carnal human desire for something, can turn into growth if that desire is channeled properly. I think about sexual transmutation as an option. Not that I'm perfect, at all. But I have seen and I've understood how you can take that energy, that desire for intimacy, and translate it into something positive. Even brainstorming about how to build the future you desire. Anger, when misdirected, can be destructive. When directed properly, can turn into a source of fuel. Observing and directing these emotions, turning that potential chaos into productive power. That's what masculinity truly does. Some questions you could ask yourself. What emotion was dominating me today? What were some of the primary emotions that were hijacking kind of the thoughts of my mind? How can I observe those emotions and those thoughts more before acting, right? Emotion, some say that emotion is energy in motion. That makes sense. How can this energy fuel something constructive? Am I acting from performative habits or from internal growth being done in real time? You can comment answers about this. We can have more of a discussion about this. But yeah, that's pretty much it. Next video, we will likely talk about how to build this kind of inner strength on a day-to-day basis, even in a very chaotic society. We could talk about deeper aspects of it and how this structure can help build a society, yet the false bravado, performative masculinity can be a great aid in destroying a society of men, which we see today very often. So yeah, you can also let me know any video you would like me to cover in the future. If you haven't seen it already, I do have a TikTok now that has been a little active. I have a Substack account as well where you can more so read my crystallized thoughts as well. And yeah, that's pretty much it. Thank y'all. This is Theophilus. Have a great day, and I'll see you in the next one.